Hi, Jürgen. Good morning from me and good evening to you.
Hi, right. Yeah, good morning to the Pacific coast, and yeah, it's already 6 o'clock or half past six in the evening in Germany. Yeah, hello.
Yeah, and remind me, what city specifically are you hailing from in Germany?
I'm calling from Düsseldorf, which is in
Hmm.
the western part of Germany. So, well, a small town near Düsseldorf. It's not exactly Düsseldorf, but the next big city is Düsseldorf.
Excellent. Yeah. How f- how far away? Do you know the conference that is Data Grillen that's done in Germany?
How is it called?
Data
Data?
Grillen. Like barbecue, like grilling.
Okay, like no, never heard
It's
of that.
that's based out of Lingen. I'm curious, like how far is Düsseldorf from Lingen?
München, well, it's around 500, maybe 600 kilometers from here, so not that close. Yeah,
And were you saying München or Lingen with an L?
Lingen.
That's where the
Ah,
Lingen. That's where the conference was. Yeah. So like I'm just wondering like what's the closest that I've been to where you have been because I've presented
oh,
at in Lingen.
okay. Well, Lingen probably is then not too far away from Frankfurt.
Hmm.
You've probably been traveling to Frankfurt.
Okay, of course.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and well, that's probably 250 kilometers from here, around that.
Okay.
Uh,
Something
so
you could
for
get to in a day.
yeah, for American perspectives, pretty close.
Yeah. It like what Europeans consider far, we consider a leisurely drive, of course.
Yeah.
Exactly. But uh, already checking the chat, it looks like we have some people from DC, Denmark, Saudi Arabia, and Matthias, who's in the chat. I know is forget the city that you're in, Matthias, but you're somewhere over in Germany as well. But I'm excited to get you on today. I know I've been using a lot of the practices and principles that you and your company have helped to helm and create for quite a few years now, and it's something that I think a lot of people from a visual and a just an insights perspective goes a long way to helping to uncomplicate things that kind of organically are fairly complicated for a lot of people. So this will be, I think, a really fun conversation and definitely something that is going to be speaking even from outside of any software itself. Like these are just principles that just work um, from the application of just looking at data from a visual perspective and what patterns go into there. But I really appreciate you coming on for this, and I'd love to start from maybe having you introduce yourself to the channel a little bit and give a bit of a background on who you are and also the organization that you represent as well.
Okay. First of all, I love the term uncomplicated. I did not know that word, so I probably should remember that. Uncomplicated is great because this is
Hmm.
exactly what we are doing. Well, my name is Jürgen Faisst. I'm one of the managing partners of the IBCS Institute and the general manager of the IBCS Association. Just to explain what those two different organizations are about. The IBCS Association is a not-for-profit organization that has been founded 10 years ago when Rolf Hichert, my partner, just transferred all his intellectual property to the public because he said, hey, those ideas are probably worth developing a kind of standard visual language, something like that. And such a standard visual language just needs to be open and public and not closed and people have to
Hmm.
pay for it or whatever. So this is why he then, together with me and some other guys, we found this IBCS association. And this IBCS association is actually responsible for the development of the International Business Communication Standards, IBCS. The IBCS Institute is the commercial part of it. Actually, we make our living from giving training courses, obviously. So
Hmm.
that's the only thing we provide: training and certification stuff around this topic. But the entire content is free. IBCS is about, let's say, collecting best practices around visualization. So it's actually the same thing people like Edward Tufte, Stephen Few, Gene Zelazny, and you name them, tell us for years. And The only thing that takes us probably one step further or sets us apart from that is that we think we should also have a kind of semantic notation. We call it the IBCS notation. Things that mean the same should consistently look the same. This is on top of the things that are out there. And this is probably the one thing we are identified with. Me personally, I have a background in business. So I've been working in several C-level positions at software vendors, at consulting companies, always in the field of FP&A and business intelligence. So this is my personal background. And the second thing you should know about myself, I'm a passionate musician. And not only playing the trombone and the piano, but I'm writing arrangements. And when writing arrangements, I think this is pretty close to writing reports. This might be surprising to you, but from an abstract point of view, you have an idea in your head, and whether this is a melody and you want to write down the melody as a musician, or whether it's how did you perform in sales last month and you want to write it down as a kind of report, from an abstract point of view, it's just the recording of your ideas. It's what we call notation. And maybe when we continue talking, you will see that comparison between music notation or the notation in other disciplines and report notation. That is actually what IBCS is about.
That's I think that's one of the first, what's in the first chapter, or the first paragraph of your book, is you mentioned the comparison of visuals to music. Somewhere really early on, I remember in the crossed outline and hatch. That makes a lot more sense now, knowing that you can read sheet music, but also compose and write it yourself. So it makes a lot of sense why you built that analogy of like, why can't we have a universal base language to read? Like if you give a chart to 30 different people, no explanation of it, they all can come to the same conclusion looking at it without having to read a document explaining what it does, because it's following certain standard principles and practices, just like you would with sheet music. Yeah.
Exactly. And the cool thing about that is that they just think it's normal. As a musician, you think it's just normal. And as, by the way, Rolf Fichert, my partner, is an engineer, and he thinks it's normal that in engineering you have this kind of let's say, electric circuit plans, which follow a real notation, a well-defined way of putting things. It's same in architecture, same in cartography. So actually, we are one of the few disciplines that do not have such a semantic notation yet, and we think it's high time to introduce such a thing.
I think it's an aspirational goal to have, and as you mentioned, like it's something that's very much needed. To a degree, there's still kind of a wild west of self-taught reports, and a lot of people that one of my favorite terms that I like to use with clients is people who like to use artificial variation, which is well, why are you using that pie chart or a tree map? Well, we already have a bar chart. We don't want two. So you're changing it to an abstract, like a funnel chart or something else that doesn't really make sense for the data, just because you want to make the report page prettier and more varied, and you're adding unnecessary complexity. Just because you don't want too many of the same visual, even though some visuals do represent data better. And I see that all the time with people who are unintentionally building bad reports or overly complicated reports that don't make sense, just because they're clicking a random visual until they find something that looks cool, not necessarily informative, but it looks cool, and they just throw that onto a report page because they don't know how to speak the language.
Exactly. And interestingly, you say they want to make it pretty and they want to make it cool. I never heard in music a composer who wants his music notation to look pretty or cool. You know, it's incredible that they even talk about that. Or an architect wants the construction plan to look pretty or cool. This is a stupid discussion. It should be the building should be pretty and the building should be cool. The music should be pretty, the music should be cool, but not the notation. And you know, it's the same. A cool report, for me, a really good report, a cool report is a report that reports good numbers, good sales numbers, good profit numbers, happy customers, and engaged employees. This is a cool report. And whether it looks pretty or not, it's just not a criteria.
It's very fair. The components themselves, one should be quality, should ideally follow that consistent pattern, but how you build them together. In a way, I like one of my favorite analogies that I've seen, because I'm a visual learner with a lot of stuff, and there's an image that circulates on LinkedIn every once in a while of what data analytics means, and it uses Lego bricks as an example for that. So it starts with a bin of Lego bricks of all shapes and colors, and then it's like, and it goes through the stages. All right, let's first take them. We're going to separate them by type. Now we're going to separate them by type and color. Now we're going to arrange them in a quantity of small, and it ends with like a chart, and scaled and all this. And we can now actually do analysis on this data after we've sorted, categorized, binned, and all this other stuff. But the universal language is that these pieces are consistent, and then how you choose to display them can change, but you still follow that pattern up until that point, leading to that analysis. But I like that because everybody knows Legos, and I think it articulates what it means to analyze and trend your data from useless, unorganized junk sitting in a database to the end result, which is a chart or a graph.
Yes, and I think that one of the reasons why especially Rolf Fichert and myself focus that much on that consistency is because we have been sitting on the other side of the desk. Many people thinking about data visualization are the creators of those reports. And if you are a creator, you don't suffer from the things you produce. But if you are the receiver, you are on the receiver's end, then you receive reports from 20 different people, and the reports from those 20 different people look completely different. So you, as the receiver, have to let's say think yourself in the visual design of every single creator of that report, and this makes it so hard to understand that stuff. So this is why we think consistency matters.
I completely agree. And I mean, since I've at least read your book, most of the clients that I have, when they ask like, what should I read on visualizations, I make sure that they just have a basic understanding of what chart types are. And from there, I almost always will recommend giving that book of yours at least a skim, if not a full read, just to understand like, how can you, for your organization, set up any type of standardization of this means this will always mean something. So whether or not it's a pattern, a color, a word, a title, a symbol, you just need to make sure that once you use it, that stays consistent across your pages. And just again, even going back to what you were saying is at the most basic level that I've seen so many reports where green, one color green or red or blue is across like 5 report pages is used for 20 different things. Like, well, now that color is completely useless now because it has no consistency on what it's supposed to represent. So, and once you at least give the idea in, once you use something, whether or not any of the things that I just mentioned, make it consistent to that categorical or representation for your organization. Like even if they invent their own language, they still are much further along than where they used to be once they realize, oh, like we need a sense of universal application for this will always mean that.
Mm-hmm. I would completely agree. It's even better if you have your own individual language within an organization that probably is not compatible with IBCS. It's much better than just having the mess of completely different things. But if you anyway start implementing a visual language, why not taking the same thing that many others already did? So if there are not good reasons why you want to differentiate yourself from that, I probably would take the one that is already there. So because it's free, it's open, it's many companies use it. There are software tools already supporting that. So why using something different? But of course, it's the consistency that matters. It's not following 100% the suggestions of IBCS. If you find another way of consistency and you can make it happen, why not? Yeah.
The end of the day, there's the phrase like if it works. You want something repeatable, scalable, and that would work. But fun as much as as much as this is fun to talk about, do we have anything we could also maybe take a look at to help explain some of these concepts a little bit as well?
Yes, I've prepared a special slide deck on one topic we
Mhm.
did not talk about yet, and that
Ooh.
is if you are consistent and if you use this visual language, you can start increasing information density. Did you
Hmm.
ever think about why, let's say, a construction plan has a much higher information density than what we deliver in our reports, or a map, or a score of a conductor in music? And this is what I would like to talk about. So let's look
Absolutely.
at a typical dashboard. So
There we go.
this is probably a dashboard on discount analysis. We found it somewhere on the web. And if you now count the data points, it's just 50 data points you are looking at. 50 data
Hmm.
points. If you look at a sheet music, 50 data points in the Hungarian Rhapsody is like that. It's around 50 data points. But what we typically have is, well, probably 160, or if you it's 49. So from our perspective in business, a real high information density. So just compare it. Here we have probably in one bar the information density of what we have in typically in business. But the musicians want to have this high information density. I actually think they need it to run through a let's say piece of music. And the same is in engineering. I told you that that Rolf Fichert is an engineer, and here we have probably 2 data points, but this is only one part of an entire plan for something like that, you know. um, and and well, this is 350 data points, single things. And of course now you can analyze the parts and pieces of that, or even more. If you look at a map here from Switzerland, it's maybe 5. I did not count it, frankly spoken. I did not count it, but hey, maybe it's more than 5,000 data points. 5,000, and it still works. And the reason why it works is because it's standardized. You know how to interpret every single visual element you find on such a map. Every single thing. And we think we can go with those 157 of this dashboard, or the 64 of that dashboard, and the 46 of this dashboard. This is our problem. And we really think that the reason why we have such a low information density is because it's 2 reasons. One, it's cluttered with decorative stuff. This is what Edward Tufte and Stephen Few have been complaining for years. Why do we have this decorative stuff? So we probably should reduce the usage of color and frames and all that stuff. And the second thing is that we do not have a standardized notation. If we would standardize notation, then we could increase information density. This is exactly what cartographers do, what engineers do, and what musicians do. So when we think about such a semantic notation, let's say create 5 rules, which is nothing, really nothing compared to what those other disciplines have. For instance, we could start with having a standard title. IBCS suggests to have a 3-line title on top of every single page, chart, table, whatever, you name it. And the first line of that title is about the who are you talking about. The second line of the title is what you're talking about. And the third line is the time frame. So if you would add such a standard title to every single report, people know exactly what the report is about. They know where they would find that title, typically in the upper left corner, and it's absolutely clear what they are looking at. Second thing, let's talk about time and structure. Why don't we show time consistently on a horizontal axis from left to right, and if possible, show structures vertically? Helps to immediately see, okay, this is a time series. The third thing, hey, This is what Tufte and others tell us for years. Apply a consistent scale. So if you use the same measure or unit of measurement in two charts on the same page, you have to apply the same scale. And of course, it's not allowed to cut axes. It's not allowed to truncate any visual elements like columns and bars. That's the third. The fourth, this is what we are famous for. Use solid and outlined for actual data and plan data consistently. Never again plan data with a filled bar or a filled column, just outlined. If it's solid with a solid fill, it means actual data. And if it's in between a forecast, then it's hatched. Solid, outlined, hatched for actual, plan, and forecast. That's the fourth one. The fifth one is using red and green, or let's say a bluish green and a warm red to help the people with color deficiencies, consistently for variances. And for variances only. Never again red and green in a pie chart or in a stacked bar chart. Never again. Because red and green are reserved for good and bad variances. Maybe pins for relative variances if you want to follow that. And now look what happens. If we only apply those 5 rules, then a stacked column chart would look like that. A waterfall, stacked columns with a waterfall of the changes would look like that. Or something in a table, a table using a vertical waterfall along an income statement would look like that. So you see the consistency, and it's just because we follow a couple of rules, much less rules than any other discipline, and it really works fine. And we can start increasing information then. You could never do that, what I show now, if everything would be colorful and with frames and with shadows and big pie charts and whatever, it would just not work. Yeah, you can even go once. I stop it here. I don't want to get further, but yeah. So this is what I wanted to give you as an idea, how a visually consistent, let's say, language, a notation, how that would help us increase information density. And just because it's so much more clear what we are looking at.
And I think one of the big things, even just with this, is just the idea of small multiples in general. Because in this, all you're doing is you're repeating a visual across different categories, either by time or something else. But at least you're not showing 25 different visuals at this point. You're showing the same one at different perspectives, cuts, or dissections of the company or the data itself with those. And it's one of my favorite features. And just taking it to a small complaint of Power BI is like, I remember with Power View, had this for Excel 12 years ago, the first, like the grandfather of Power BI as a plugin. And they took it away for like 7 years inside of Power BI and only added it back like two and a half, 3 years ago. But it was one of those requested features because it's so useful to be able to trellis out your visual and see repeating charts like this that also share a common scale as well. So you can appropriately look at that like minus 144 compared to a 25 from your upper left to lower right and know that the size of the bar is representative between the two of them as well.
Yeah. Well, here I just duplicated the ones to give you an impression. Yeah. But yes, this is exactly. And by the way, as you say it, I personally don't like dashboards where they have too many different types of widgets on one page, because then you have a pie chart here and a let's say some gauge there, and here you have a bar chart, here you have a column chart, then you have some bubbles here and a line chart there, and you every time you need to reorient your perception to get that. I really think that staying with increasing information density while staying with the same kind of, let's say, visual representation, like here, for instance, it's still very high information density. Do you see what we have here? So we have the June data We have the January to May data. So as together, we have the year-to-date June, yeah? Then we have the expectation for the year to go. So the full bar is the full year, the expectation for the full year. You see that? And this for all the countries, I did not count them, let's say 25 countries, we have the month, we have the year to date, and we have the year to go expectation. And then we also have the variance for the single month, we have the variance for the year to date, and we have the variance that you can expect for the end of the year. How cool is that in one visual? And you don't need a table here and a bar chart there and a column chart here and a line chart there. It's all within bars. And I think this is where we need to go.
Well, and I think the thing that a lot of this does really well and focuses on, and I've been telling clients for years, is ratios and variances, number one, and especially if you can get to percentage ratios. Because if I told you like, oh, sales are up 50,000 this month, great, but is that a 1% increase? Is that a 85% increase? If I told you sales have been up 64%, that give you, I can just tell you that blindly, and that is likely a reasonably good representation of that. There was a large positive change for an organization with that. So I think the focus with most of the stuff that I've seen that you have had for templates and others, or even the integrated bullets, is it really goes down to letting you look at variances, either with a prior period or variances with some type of plan, budget, or forecast, which is where the actual insights come from.
Yes, absolutely. And what you're saying, that you also want to know whether it's, let's say, a big relative change. You also have this here. If you look at that, you see that, where is it here? If you look at that, you can compare, let's say, probably it's behind me. I'm not sure. I'll take this one. So the minus 41. The minus 41. If you look at the minus 41, the length of the minus 41 can be compared to the length of the absolute data. So despite the fact that we do not show a relative variance, you get a feeling that the minus 41 probably is less than 10% of the total, because you see both, and visually you can compare the length of the absolute bar with the length of the variance bar. So visually, let's say, calculating the relative variances, although you don't see it, it's not visually displayed. Of course, we could add it, but you probably already get an impression how much it is.
Exactly. The callouts, I think, really just, again, help represent and focus on the data that you should pay attention to, rather than essentially the raw data before comparative analysis or anything else that lets you look across them. And I am curious, so do you have any examples of kind of some before and afters? We've seen a lot of representation of what the data looks like now, but a couple people in the chat were mentioning like pie charts and a few others. So like if you have anything available on that, it might be a good topical moment to take a look at some kind of before and afters of what it means to actually translate stuff into more meaningful graphical representations of information.
If we probably, of course, if you probably look at pie charts, just go to Google and tell Google, hey, wouldn't you want to show me some great pie charts? Huh? This is the result, what you would get. And of course, people have been bashing at pie charts. And actually, I do not want to make too much of a pie chart bashing, because the good news with pie charts is they are not wrong. They are not misleading, they are not wrong. They probably are just boring, But yeah, so let's have a closer look at that. So, for instance, if you want to compare 4 countries, and of course we can compare the share of those countries within 2019. So we get a feeling that probably France is 1/3 and Spain is 1/3 and Greece and Italy together is the third. So we get that feeling for 2019. The problem is we cannot compare it against something else, for instance, against 2020 or against 2021 or against another product or against another company. So it's always limited to one dimension. Here, the regional dimension, we only can compare one regional dimension. And when we try to increase information density by adding more pie charts, it doesn't get any better. So that's a problem. The question is, what can we do? We could probably start with showing the development of Spain, which is the blue part of the four pie charts, and show the development of Spain, of course, of France, of Greece, and of Italy. Then the question is why we need the color. We can get rid of that color. And now we probably can even show the individual trends. So we still have horizontally the split of the total between Spain, France, Greece, and Italy. So if we compare vertically, but we also have the development horizontally. We could even put that into a stacked column chart and normalize that to 100%. That would probably then also help. But what I want to say is, it's smaller. It only takes 50% of the space of the original chart, but it's already better from the story it tells. And if we would go to 100%, we probably could add some more periods, or we could start stacking things there and we could show so many things just on the same space as we had originally. And I think everyone will agree that the information density on the right-hand side is much higher than on the left-hand side we had before with this one. So this is one of the reasons why I would also always recommend considering replacing pie charts by other things, because using the same space, you can get much more information across and give more insight into the situation. If it's a time series, if it's a comparison, if it's whatever, give more insight than just comparing the slices of a pie chart. That's the main thing, what it is about.
When I do this constantly with, I was just going to say, I'll do this constantly with clients, is just in Power BI, I'll throw two visuals on the same page. I will right click, copy, paste a pie chart, turn it into a bar, and just like, how much easier is it for you to tell France from Moldova in terms of their ratios to each other or anything like that. Now, I will at least play devil's advocate and say, like, certain things like binary true false yes no's, or like yes no maybes, like voting on who voted what. Pie charts can be useful for very, very simple things, but I almost never use it for anything more than 3 categories. And if and it usually is for like human type votes or bucketing people into categories of stuff like that. That's the few and rare times that I will actually use a pie chart over something else. And partially just because it, as a square visual on a page, there's a lot of white space that it takes up. It's just, I feel like it occupies a lot of space on the page that is unused, again, versus other visuals.
Yeah. There are some cases where they probably do a good job. So let me just show an example where they do a good job. So if it's a map of Germany, and if you want to see the different regions of Germany, you could replace the regions by those bubbles. And if you now have the bubbles, you could also add, let's say, portions to those bubbles. So what I want to say is that here in Eastern Germany, this is the size of the market, let's say in Eastern Germany, and your portion of the market is indicated with this piece of a pie here. And in the Western part, we have a little more of the pie, and the pie is even bigger than the other. So in this case, I would probably say, well, that's something where a pie chart can do a good job. But in general, I'm reluctant with pie charts.
Yep. Well, in situations like this, in a between 2 categorical values and also in a small space on a high density map, they make sense. You can't put a 17 category bar chart on 75 countries on a small map on a page. Like if you're going to do sub breakouts, it is something like this, and that's exactly what is actually done today in the the traditional Power BI map is if you actually put anything on the legend, it turns it into some type of a pie chart. But again, sadly, people often put something with 8 to 12 to 15 categories, and where you end up with these like 8-pixel tall pie charts with a 1 pixel or less sliver of all these slices. And when you hover over that, you don't get much of a labeling or anything else. So again, it goes just back to like, you have a color wheel of kind of useless data, unless you do something more binarily categorical like you're showing here.
Absolutely, yeah. And you see, again, we reduced the color, so it's black and gray and white. And the reason why we also reduce color, by the way, all other disciplines also reduce color. You probably realized that music notes are black and white, that electric circuit plans are black and white, that construction plans are black and white. The reason why we reduce it is because we want to use color for more important things than just showing here, let's say, some regions or something like that. We need color for the things we want to highlight. If you ask a designer, what is the strongest spice in your, let's say, toolbox? Then the designer will tell you, oh, it's color. Okay, I say, if color is the strongest spice we have, then we should assign color to the most important thing in our reports. And what is the most important thing in our reports? It's the variances and other highlighting. So this is why we would try to avoid using too much color or very light color only in let's say, the background things, and then work with bright red, bright green, and probably bright blue, just to highlight things. And then it will literally jump into the eyes of your audience, and they see what's going on. As opposed to the situation where everything is colorful and shiny, and you have a hard time to even detect something because you are so overwhelmed by all that color. Yeah, that's another thing that I think is really important when you declutter your dashboards.
And let's actually, and to that exact question, I think there's a really good comment and question from somebody in the channel. So Victor mentions that Cole from Storytelling with Data blog and others support the use of space as a design element, and it seems to some ways conflict or go in the opposite direction of high density reports. So what do you think specifically about white space or negative space?
Well, I don't think it goes in the opposite direction. So let's first talk about white space. I think discussing on white space just because it's white space is wrong. I would always start with the purpose of a report. And it depends on the purpose, whether you need a lot of data to show what's going on, or whether you are fine with less data. I would never show more data than necessary on a report. However, I would also never show less data than necessary. So if I only need, let's say, a couple of data points and easy visualizations to prove my message, I would leave the rest in white space. And this is probably then the easiest way to prove your message. But often in business, we will need more information. And then before I start separating that information on, let's say, different slides or on different reports or different report pages or kind like that, I would then increase information density. I think having an overview on one page is worth increasing the information density. But still, I would follow a call from Storytelling with Data that we can use space as a design element, not in the terms that we want to keep, let's say, 50% white space in our report. That's not probably also not what Cole is telling us, but to give it a good structure. So space for arranging things so that you immediately understand what's going on, using white space to separate different aspects you are focusing on, and so on, instead of just posting different widgets in order to make the report page full. I would also agree to that. I think using space and grids and all that stuff you have for arranging things on one page is very important as a design element.
When I think to me, an analogy that just popped up as an example of density, and density can be subjective depending on the variation of data points in the page. If you had 35 separate charts with separate categories, data, and all that, individually put onto a page, that would be an incredibly overly dense and rich page to look at, where you have to, as you said, kind of change your mental framework every time you look at a different visual, because it is an entirely disconnected separate data set. If you had one visual that was trellised or small multiple 35 times for every region that you're showing your sales data in, that is a dense report page, but not necessarily one that is overwhelming, because you're looking at the same chart just for different categorical cuts. So each has 35 charts on the page, and just as many data points. But I think the discerning difference for me, in terms of how dense can something be, is how much shared assets do they have? If they follow the similar pattern, something IBCS or similar, that does reduce the complexity while keeping the density high. And also, if it's repeating the same visual entirely, but again with trellising, you can also increase your density, because now you know that each time you look from A to B, you're keeping the exact same mindset as you just look at the different sizes and numbers, without having to reconfigure anything in your brain. So I think they work together with each other to allow for an increased density.
I completely agree to what you're saying, and I would like to add something additionally, and this is training. We in business always think that the things we provide as reports should be, let's say, kind of self-explanatory. So everyone should immediately understand. You present it to someone, and this person should immediately understand. I would not agree. If you look at the other disciplines, let's say, take the electric circuit plan of your washing machine. Huh? If you take it from the shelf, you probably have one at home. Do you understand that one?
Actually, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Actually, I don't. I'm not an electric engineer, and I don't understand it in detail. So what I want to say is, there are people that have been trained in reading this kind of high density notation. It's the same in music. You know, did you ever look at a conductor score? You know, very high information density. You have 50 instruments on one page. All the 50 people playing, let's say, an opera are on one page, and you see it at the same time. Thousands of black dots on one page. And I never heard a conductor complaining about too many black dots on his page. No, this is exactly what he wants to have. But he has been trained in reading that. So if you would show exactly this high density thing that a conductor needs to run his orchestra through an opera, if you would show this report, let's say this report, to a child in recorder lesson playing the flute, of course this child would not understand anything. So what I want to say is, we have to adjust the information density to the professionalism of our audience. And our audience is of completely different levels of professionalism. If I talk to a CFO of a company, I can expect he is at the same level as the conductor of an orchestra. And he should have been learning this visual language, how to understand more high dense things, because I think running a company is not easier than running an orchestra through an opera. So if a conductor really, let's say, kind of if you conduct an orchestra, and you need that information density, you probably would need a similar information density, probably even higher information density to run your people in an organization, to run business in a company. So what I want to say is we probably need a notation, a visual language, and we need training on that. The difference is that the professional musicians, the professional engineers, and the professional cartographers, they have learned how to read and to write their notation at the university. In business schools today, you don't learn a visual language, and you don't learn how to apply it when you create reports. So at the end of your studies, you just do as you think might be appropriate. But there is not such a visual language, and there is no training for it. And I think we spoil the opportunity to really have better visualizations with higher information density, better stories, because we, first of all, don't have that visual language. We have to establish it. And secondly, we did not train people in how to use it and how to read it. Probably it will take another 5 years or 10 years to get there. Hey, the musician, it took them centuries to get there. But and we started 10 years ago. But I'm pretty sure in 10 years from now, it will just be normal when you finish your studies at a business school that you learn that visual language and that you have been trained in how to apply that to reports and how to read them. And then we can work with a much higher information density.
As you're mentioning, I think there's a degree of it's rising waters raise all ships. And I think you might need to turn down the speaker just a little bit. I'm getting feedback. I'm getting feedback from you just a little bit in the if you want to turn down the speaker just a tiny bit.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect. So there's a point by Victor made in the chat just on whether or not some of this can leave people behind if you need to have a new language to speak on. So I'm curious, and maybe going back to your point on whether or not all versus some needs to be adopted, and how also adopting an external language versus maybe just leveraging what an internal language can be for a client. On Victor's point of kind of a pro and con, just making sure that if some people in an organization, but not everybody learns something, are they going to suffer or be in any way left on the bench versus the individuals who are learning said new languages?
Well, this is a difficult question. I think we should adapt information density to our audience. That means we should, before we create a report, we should always have in mind who is the receiver. And if the receiver is a very broad, unexperienced audience on, let's say, recorder lesson level in music, then we should create reports on recorder lesson level. Yes, so especially if you have external presentations, so you are not internal in your organization, but you have an analyst presentation or whatever, you should adapt the complexity to the level you can expect, the level of understanding you can expect. But, but if you are really, no.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a mistake on my side. So if you really work with the professional guys within your organization, I think we can start improving and increasing that. Just to give you an example, this morning I had a long working day today, because this morning from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, I had a group of board members, the entire board of a shipment services company in Hong Kong. Yeah? And the reason why they wanted me to give that lesson, it was the second one, is that they felt that they what was the term? They uncomplicate. They wanted to uncomplicate their reports they have. They wanted just to apply more consistency, and they realized if they apply more consistency, they probably can even get down from a 12-page slide deck to a 2 or 3-page slide deck, because the main things are then even perceivable on one page. So I think it's worth it to educate the professional guys, the professional, especially the FP&A people, to train them how to read and how to create that stuff. Well, be aware that you cannot go to that level if you have another audience. Of course, I would not leave the people behind, but adapt to the audience.
And I do think just on your points of I think density and bringing things together, the easiest way that I can help a client just know, like, should I keep these like data points together or should I separate them? It's like, well, do you ever have to do mental math? If you ever have to look at a visual, okay, that's 42. And then you have to go to another page and remember what was the number. Okay, that's 42 compared to this. If you're ever comparing two values and one of them has to be stored in your brain because it's not next to the other value that you need to compare it with, that is the situations where you keep them together. If there are two values that are completely island, orphaned, or isolated from each other and have no reason to be together, then those are the options to split it to different pages or different subsections or anything else. But like, I found that is the easiest way to explain to someone when things need to be dense and adjacent versus just simply separate across different pages, telling different stories with the data.
Yes, completely agree, especially the second part of your sentence, where you say, if there are things on one page that are not visually related because you anyway cannot compare them. So if your perception does not start comparing things, then there is actually no need to put it on the same page. You have to put the things on the same page that you start, let's say, relating, comparing visually with your system one. By the way, do you know that discussion about system one and system two how was the Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman? Daniel Kahneman has been writing Thinking Fast and Slow. This is exactly the thinking fast and slow thing. So we try, when we visualize, we try to leverage our system one, which is our more intuitive, fast thinking stuff. And this is immediately comparing the things that are on one page. But if I look at especially Power BI dashboards, or well, maybe it's also with other tools, you have the feeling they post all the different widgets they have on one page. And you cannot compare a pie chart with a line chart side by side, and then there is this and there is that. Actually, the widgets are not related to each other. And if they are not related to each other, I ask myself, what is the reason why you put them side by side on one page? You could also split the information on multiple pages because there is no relation in between.
Exactly. And it's the fewest data points needed to allow you to answer a question is how I try to build in a report page. Like, yes, high density is useful when you need it, but obviously not everything has to be highly dense. Like if you can answer a question with 5 data points, that is all you need on a report page. But if you need 500 across small multiples and a few others to answer a question because you're doing a comparative analysis of all 50 states or something, it can be useful to trellis that out across those. Yeah. So only build as little as possible to allow for that easy answer. Anything past that is just unnecessary.
Yes. I would also like to distinguish the two types of reports. There are those two types. We have been talking about Cole Knaflic. Cole Knaflic, Nussbaumer, she calls it exploratory versus explanatory reports. We at IBCS, we call them analysis type of reports versus message type of reports. And here again, we have the difference between the information density. If you use a report for doing analysis yourself, so you do not know yet what you are looking for, you just do the analysis, then obviously you need more data points and you need all the functionality to drill down and to drill across. But if you already know what you did find out and you just want to convey your findings, then it's probably much less information density because you can reduce your data set to the relevant points you need to prove your message. So what I want to say, in a PowerPoint presentation where you just present the conclusions of your analysis, you probably don't need that high information density. On a dashboard where you don't know what you are looking for and you want to compare all the things just to figure out what's going on, you probably need a much higher information density. So this also is an aspect to keep in mind, those two types of reports.
I think that that discernment between the two of the like, have you already come to a conclusion and you're presenting your findings versus are you on the hunt to find something insightful from your data itself? And like that to a degree determines a lot of what density is needed. Density is needed primarily for the investigation, not necessarily the summary, unless you're trying to highlight a key point or something like that. I do know we're also coming close towards time, and as far as some other visualization types that we discussed that might be good to talk about a little bit. I think if we have time, maybe wrapping up with what you have in front of you, the gauges, and also just ways to transform tables into visualizations. Both of those I think might be fairly topical and relevant to discuss a little bit as we start to wrap up.
Okay, happy to do that. So probably we start with the gauges. So how to get rid of the gauges? Again, we just have a Google search about the gauges, and those are those things you get. And obviously, we don't like them too much. And the reason why is, if you look at such a radial gauge chart, then it's probably this way that you have the speedometer or something like on the right hand side. So those are the typical things. So let's start with that. Actually, you see that it starts with the usage of color. The gauges often use color wrong because they show the area where you get in red and green instead of showing the variance red and green, which then would help immediately to see what's going on. But then if you reduce it actually to the variance, the question is, why don't you put it on and just use a bar chart? It's the same variance, and now you can easily compare the four of them. It would not have been possible before to compare them.
There you go.
You probably could even do more. You get rid of some frames and so on. And I think if you now look at the space, it takes much less space, but it's probably the better comparison. I hope you agree. So this is 20% of the space we need. And we can even do, if we use the same space, it's always the same logic. If we would use the same space, we could even go for a time series. So not only seeing how is Berlin performing now, but where do they come from? So we probably look at 10 periods, we look at a forecast, and we show some maybe even portions of it, and can show some trends on the same area. And again, like with pie charts, we think it's just more interesting, the story you can tell. And I don't think that the information density is too high to understand it. I definitely think that the visual on the right-hand side is easier to understand than the visual on the left-hand side. Hope you agree.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's like there's also a bit of an easier Z pattern that you can follow, and the less that your eyeball has to bounce around to keep going from A to B data point, if it can follow in a smaller space, I think mentally for me and most people, it's easier to digest because you're not constantly going from like Berlin to you're moving around in a frantic pattern. When I look at the one on the left, like you can feel your eyes moving around, having to look at all those points and go back from one to the other because they're so far apart. Versus it's more of a gradual scan. And I wish, and I'd love to see like somebody actually do a study on this, like put on those eye tracker glasses and have people look at couple reports and show the actual pattern of where their eyes move around. They've done this on other stuff with like software testing, right? To see how much people's eyes move, and it's kind of crazy the layout and how much an eye will just shotgun around a page versus follow a clean, consistent pattern. And that reduces cognitive load when you can move your eyes around less.
There has been some research on that. I'm not sure whether you are aware of that. There has been some research from an Austrian University of Applied Science. Professor Losbichler did some research on that. But there is also some research from Technical University in Munich, together with a consulting company in Germany called Blue Fort. They even went one step further. They even checked if you have, let's say, the typical reports, the before examples, and you have reports following this consistent notation, they did not only check the eye tracking, they also checked how long does it need, what time does it need to understand the content of the report. And they
Oh,
also,
nice.
and they have been asking questions after looking at the report and checked the number of wrong answers. And the cool thing is that the number of wrong answers could be reduced by 61%. And at the same time, the answers have been given 46% faster. So it reduces, obviously, the amount of time you need for analysis and for giving the answer to half, but still the number of wrong answers is, let's say, also half. If you apply that.
What's the name of this study? Because somebody was actually asking for that, so I can do a quick Google and see if I can pop up a link to that if there's anywhere online for this.
Well, it's on our website, and it's a Blue Forte. Blue Forte is the company called Blue Forte study on semantic notation and eye tracking. Not sure whether you find.
I see one. I see Blue Forte as a provider link on your website. At least.
Yes.
If I look up for Blue FORT, let's just see if I do a quick search on your. Here we go. There's that. There's some newsletters.
If you go to the resources tab and the recommended reading, and you scroll down in the recommended reading, probably on the third or on the fourth page, scrolling down.
Here it is. I found it. Yes.
Yeah.
More than just a standard.
Yeah, more than just the standard. That's the name of the study. Exactly. So this is interesting because they did some eye tracking things, and when you look at a standard report, then eyes are just going round and here and there to the external legends and back and forth, and it's really incredible. And if you get accustomed to just a standard layout, they look at the standard title in the upper left corner, they try to figure out the legends which are very close to the data series, they look at the trend at the data series, and they are done. So it's really cool research they did.
And I can imagine like a lot of scenarios and I'm going to read the study when I'm done, but it would make a lot of sense is track where their eyes go, and then basically have them click a button or a timer to say like, all right, click this or press this when you think you've consumed enough of the report data that you can answer a series of questions about it, and then how many of those do you get right? Versus wrong. I mean, who had the highest sales per this, or without having to go or anything like that. So I like that study, and I think it can show just IBCS or otherwise. I think just a well-designed report. There's really a lot of cognitive load, which is the term that I use, that can be reduced when it's been built properly.
Yeah. And I don't know whether we have the time to look at tables. It's the same with tables. Do we have the time to look at tables, or
Please.
Is it already? Yeah. Okay.
We can go into that.
Let's briefly go into the table. So if you look at this Volkswagen table for key financial figures, then if you look at that, you have the vehicle sales, which is actually the number of sales of vehicles. So 1,000 vehicles, but it looks exactly the same as the sales revenue. And then you have some kind of let's say income statement with percentages, some percentages even missing. If you look at the right, I don't know why things are missing there. Sometimes there is an X. So I don't want to go in the details. So if this is where we start, you just see there are different types of rows. here we have of which rows. Before we had percentage rows, we had the standard rows here for the operating profit and so on. So what we suggest is giving it a standard layout. So this is how the headlines should look like. This is how the standard rows should look like. This is how of which rows should look like. You see, they are smaller than the associated consulting row. And there is no line in between because it's of which, whereas between the others, there are those very light dotted lines. So this is just a formatting aspect. Why don't we start giving the people creating tables a standard format where they know exactly when to use those gaps in between, how to show presented. You see the percent of sales use an italic design. And if you do that consistently, then also for the columns, of course, you give the columns a purpose and the purpose gets a design. So again, you have a consistent notation. Things that mean the same always look the same, also in tables. You can even then start adding the same type of charts in between. And you can even probably start adding spark lines if they are properly scaled, of course. So not individually scaled, but hey, probably indexed would be the right way. And now look at this table, which is not only IBCS compliant, but it's very easy readable, very high information density, even some properly scaled spark lines here indexed, and you see the absolute and the relative variances, and just compare it to the original. I hope you see the difference, and all our guests out there see the difference that it makes if you apply a consistent visual language, not only to charts, but also to tables.
Well, and in general, with a lot of these too, is the term that I like to use from especially like finance, who comes from a lot of them still to this day, they Excel is king for the fact that you're showing here like percentage rows and all this other stuff, which natively isn't really easily available in the reporting tools, at least such as Power BI, unless you do like some fancy modeling. Like it takes a bit of effort to get like custom tables with custom rows and all this other stuff. So they go to Excel, but the problem also that they end up with this in Excel is is the sea of numbers, like SEA, like ocean of numbers, as I describe it, with white background, 500 numbers. But the problem is if you see 47 and you see like 35, like it's mental math. Like to know the relative size between the two, you have to continue to track in your brain what you're looking at to find the biggest number. So anytime you can add waterfall charts, lollipop charts, anything that can just help you break out the information to call out the values that are important to you goes a long way. And it turns tables into visualization. So like I love tools like this. I mean, for years at a bare minimum with clients, I've at least tried to use colors or icons to anything that can help to just call out KPIs of the data you're looking at, because tables are the densest visual, often outside of maybe scatter plots or something else that you will typically have on a page. Hundreds of rows, dozens of columns, really dense data. And if it's nothing but numbers, it's really hard to get insights at a glance without having to spend a lot of time staring at the information. So all these things just make it quicker to insight.
Absolutely, I agree. And if you create tables like this that we now see on our screen, then you can also add them to dashboards. I rarely see any tables on dashboards, and the reason is because the tables are just not good. As you say, it's just a sea of numbers. But if you have well-designed tables like this one, I don't see any reason why not to add such a table, especially if it's if you also have some visualizations in there. Why not adding that to a dashboard? I think this is cool information on a dashboard.
I agree. And somebody was mentioning in chat is there are now in Power BI custom visual platforms that do support these, such as InfoRivers, Zebra BI or Zebra BI. So these types of table designs that are like IBCS standardized are at least available now, not natively, but through the kind of the custom visual store that they have. If you want to use stuff like this for financial statements or anything else, that makes it a lot easier to build than trying to hack apart the model using native visuals.
Yes, there are actually two things that are good with those visuals. The first thing is you can do it. So it adds the capability to Power BI. But the second is they do it per default. So if you want to have consistency within an organization, you do not have to train your 100 analysts to do it the same way. You just have to tell them, use that tool, and the tool will do the job for you, because tables in InfoRiver or in Zebra BI will always look like that. You probably can change it to look different, but per default, they will look like that. And this is the cool thing. Adoption of this type of visualizations within an organization is much easier if you use a tool that creates this kind of visuals per default. And this is probably the most important aspect of those tools. On the other hand, you are probably aware that Microsoft themselves, they use this type of visuals, by the way, and they started integrating some of the basic things into Power BI. So they are well aware of IBCS and the benefits of IBCS, and they recently started adding some basic IBCS stuff to their visualization module. Far from being IBCS compliant, but at least they are aware that there is something out there probably worth considering.
Yeah, it's Miguel Myers in the PBI Core Visuals team. I've been one of the community representatives that's kind of helped to prioritize the tasks that they're going. But I'm glad he's behind the helm. Like it's the first time somebody with basically a master's in design as a background who is in charge of making the visuals better. Because that, I will be very like honest and say, of all the things that Power BI is amazing for, the thing that has historically been at the bottom of that list is pretty visuals, or visuals that are highly customizable. It has the best data model, I think, in the world for modeling large sets of data, but it was lacking behind Tableau and all the other platforms for rich features in the visual layer. So we've had a lot of stuff, as you just mentioned, in the last year. A lot of more things coming, but it is nice to see that I think two worlds can exist for the people who need incredibly feature-rich tools. There's custom visuals out there that will get you this out of the box, but also let you customize it. But for the people who want a couple clicks to just put a few charts on the page, get it out of the gate and published, I do appreciate that they're adding more base features into Power BI to just let people easily get to something that fits better for their organization rather than having to go the custom visuals route. So there's kind of both can exist for them, but I think the choice is becoming easier on what they can do and when versus native and kind of enterprise custom visuals.
Yes, and again, it's the question, who is your user? I think that there are two types of users out there. If you have the typical FP&A people, they probably would go for the things that you now see on your screen. If you have the, let's say, data scientist people that are more interested in statistical analyses, and then you probably need more additional stuff to show relationships and this and that. But this is just a different use case. And as you say, I think Power BI has to serve both use cases. And but I'm really happy to see that with Miguel Myers, they also start supporting more the FP&A community to get their things easily. So really appreciate his work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always going to be a bit of a double-edged sword. Any time you increase integrations, it pushes back on the custom visual community. But I do feel like he has worked hard to try to both stand up features that should have been there from the beginning, but also to still support the custom visual community, which will always, I think, provide the options and features which are geared towards the individuals that want something more feature rich or more customizable beyond what native visuals ever should be doing in the first place. But it's a there's always going to be a bit of a Venn diagram overlap of who should be doing what and where. But I think once the dust settles and everything's been integrated with this, I think we'll have both a good set of native features and then custom visuals that support your template. And even as you just mentioned, if 8 different companies leverage any of your, I think is it 5 core templates that you have for tables? Are they like T1?
It's even only four templates
Okay,
for
4.
tables.
Yeah, 4 templates. So regardless of what product brand or company that you use that has adopted IBCS, they should, for the base template, completely unchanged, you should not be able to know what product that was coming from for the most part, at least at a glance, because it should look like that T1 or T2. Now, every company might have different ways to add tooltips or all the other stuff, but at a glance, you should always look the same from the start before any, out of box additional configurations from there.
You know what? Then we are there where the musicians are for hundreds of years. So if you want to write down Jingle Bells in F major, there are no 2 ways in doing that. So if you write down Jingle Bells in F major and I do it, it will look almost the same. Okay, it's handwriting. But if you use a tool, there are multiple notation tools for music. If you use one tool, say whatever, Finale, and I use a different one, the result will be the same. And it's incredible. If you tell Tableau, hey, the result of your analysis, how you visualize that should be the same as in Power BI, they will tell you, what? And I say, hey, yeah, from a user perspective, it's exactly as you say, Red. You should not even see what tool is behind the report you get. I'm not interested. As the receiver, I'm not interested what tool you have been using. I'm just interested in the result. And this should be the same for the same message you want to get across.
Exactly. The perfectly built report at some point following that native language is the all right, well, what was this built with? I could probably list 7 things right now that could have made this, just because it shares a certain set of universalness, if that is a word that I can create in the moment. But there's been a lot of really good content I think that we've gone over today, and I think this has helped to explain, as you mentioned, creating a language to a degree. Like, can we all speak the same language versus trying to talk English to Latin to German to French, and also not necessarily realizing you're talking in different languages. You share enough words, but even if you know the same word, does it have the same meaning? Behind all of that. So it is there's a lot of ambition behind creating a standardization, but clearly it is making an impact in the community, and is, I think, my favorite takeaway is the fact that you mentioned that it is starting to get integrated into the platforms themselves. Custom visual companies have already adopted this for years and have been talking about it, and it's now, to a small degree, little bits of that stuff has been getting integrated directly with Microsoft and others. So clearly there is a voice being heard by enterprise clients and stuff where they're asking for this stuff. Because the community members like myself have a voice with Microsoft. We're generally not the ones who will get immediate change pushed into big companies like that. It's when the Fortune 50 and the Fortune 10 companies are the ones who are asking for this, then who are spending $10 million a month on subscriptions. Those are the people who get changes made quickly at companies. And I think there's been enough of those voices heard within Microsoft and maybe even other platforms where hey, we would like this more tightly integrated with our platforms. So clearly you are starting to help make some waves and positive changes on language adoption for visualization practices. So that's been really nice.
That's actually the reason why it has been implemented in SAP Analytics Cloud. Exactly that reason.
Oh, really?
Of course, they have been aware that there is something out, but they would not want to listen to me or to Rolf Hichelt. Why should they? Huh? But they listen to their big customers, and they have, of course, a big customer base in Central Europe. And the big customers in Central Europe told them, if you are creating a new analytics tool, make sure it follows the IBCS standards. And they did.
Nice.
So, well, it's exactly how you're saying. Yeah.
I hate to like boil it down to something as simple as like money does help drive change, especially when you have the
Sure.
large customers saying that. So if you need adoption, don't have the community representatives sell it. Get the clients of the community representatives to make sure to let the companies know, hey, I would like these features added, and things go a lot quicker. Uh, my only other um, I think takeaway from this is is curious that like in the next couple of years, like if you were to forecast for yourself, like what are things yet that haven't been accomplished that you still would like to accomplish for your organization? Maybe as a final question before we end up wrap up today.
Um, so first of all, and actually it's two things that need to be established in order to make it happen. I think, as we said, the software vendors have to adopt that. So if Microsoft does it, if SAP does it, if Oracle does it, if Google does it, if, let's say, you name it, Amazon does it, then one portion is done. And I think we are on a good way in doing that. The second thing that needs to be done is education. I think the topic belongs in the business schools. It's not okay that there are some small training companies like ours training people in what is IBCS and how to apply that. It should be actually established at the business schools in the world. And we actually started with that. Interestingly, this is harder than we expected. So the software vendors are easier because we get them via the customers, as you say. So we get the customers, and the customers tell the software vendors, "Hey, do it." Getting into the educational academic space is much harder, and it probably will take another 5 to 10 years to get that done. So if I'm 61 years old now, so when I'm 75, hopefully we have done that job. And then I think if all the students coming from the universities know that language and how to apply that, and the software supports it, probably even natively, then we are done.
The getting the next generation essentially talking the same language from the get go, rather than having to go in, as you said, with corporate trainings. But you're teaching one out of thousands of companies at a time, and even then you're teaching 20, 30 people out of hundreds, if not thousands, at an organization. But I think that's fair. It's like there's a degree of like with analytics comes visualization, and with visualization comes standards, and those, if you're going to teach anything about like digesting and analyzing data to any degree with a business, something should be taught about the end result, not just processing the data, but displaying the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this would
Excellent.
be my final wish. And hopefully in 10 years from now or 15 years from now, we get it done.
Perfect. Well, I fingers crossed for that, and I'm certainly doing my best ability to advocate from mine as well with clients. And I've even actually suggested, because I'm part of the University of Washington here in Seattle. I do help them run. I'm on the board for their visualization program for continuing education, and your content is definitely something that I have made sure to at least include, as it's not taught in the class, but under the recommended readings, it is listed in there as one of the things to review as part of their continued learning when they go through the Power BI and visualization course. So my small parts to help with that.
If we can support you with some material, just and by the way, all the others listening out there, if we can support you in spreading the idea with some of the material we have, just reach out to me, connect to me on LinkedIn, drop me an email or whatever, and we will be happy to make that happen.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. And for anybody watching now or later, information and contact for Jürgen is down below. But otherwise, I want to thank you so much for coming on for this and spending time walking through all of this. I think this was a very informative session. I even learned a few new things just about.
Um, for whatever reason, Ray, I don't hear you anymore. But well, So let me thank you for having me. I think we are at the end of the discussion. So have been happy to be with you, and hopefully see you next time. Okay. 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 Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.